Today's video is sponsored by GVG Mall, where you can get a Windows 10 serial key for only $17, and by using my discount code you get a 20% off discount, making it even less, $14. After the payment, you'll receive the serial key, and to activate it just go to your Windows settings and introduce that same key. And voila! You have an activated system for only $14. Hello guys, Ashit Gameplays, I'm Fabio Pisco, and today we have a new video. So today's video is about the 1st gen Ryzen 5 APU, 4 cores, 8 threads versus a 3rd gen Ryzen 3 CPU, also with 4 cores, 8 threads. In this case, Ryzen 5 2400G versus Ryzen 3 3100. The most expensive 1st gen Ryzen 5 APU versus the cheapest Ryzen 3 available on the 3rd gen, so Ryzen 3 3100. So most of you once again must be thinking something like, well, this video is not needed at all because blah 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 blah. This is a stupid question, of course Ryzen newest gen is faster. Okay, we all know that, and well, at the first thought, yes, Ryzen 5 better than Ryzen 3, but well, both have 4 cores, 8 threads, but even if the newest gen is faster, it is faster by how much? For example, people in third world countries that have, for example, the Ryzen 5 2400G, they bought it because they used the integrated graphics first, then after that they got, for example, an RX 570, and after that they really want to know if it is worth to upgrade the APU to a CPU or not. So for people wanting that, for people wanting to know if it is worth the upgrade from Ryzen 5 2400G to Ryzen 3 3100, this is why I'm making this video. But well, without any further delays, don't forget to hit like, subscribe and share the video because that really helps a lot. And let's go to the part you really want to see, I mean, the benchmarks. See you in the conclusion. To open the benchmark set, we have Assassin's Creed Odyssey, already showing some interesting results for both CPUs. You may be asking yourself why the results are the same at 1080p and 1440p, and no, it is not a typo, it is simply how things are. In this case, both CPUs are bottlenecking hard, hence the results being the same. Ryzen 5 2400G is unable to deliver more than 60 average FPS in this benchmark, while the Ryzen 3 3100, also bottlenecking, gives us a way better experience with around 70 average FPS. The biggest difference is in fact on the 1% lows and not on the averages. This means that with Ryzen 5 2400G you'll have drops to around 36 FPS, 36, while with Ryzen 3 3100 you'll be always around 50 FPS at least. And that makes a huge difference in terms of smoothness. Overall, Ryzen 3 3100 is far superior on this game, even at 4K.
From behind the poster. And the ones that see it happen freak out and try to forget what they saw. I'm here. Why did you bring me here? Hello?
The second game is Remedy's Control using the X12 and medium settings. As can be seen, the difference is not as bad as before, since Control is more GPU focused, so even at over 100 FPS the difference between both CPUs are really small. At 1080p the difference is around 10 FPS, as can also be seen in the side-by-side comparison. And it gets reduced as we go into higher resolutions or, of course, higher graphical settings, making the GPU not being able to push as much FPS. Overall, the difference in this game is around 8% at 1080p, which is not significant. Now with the beloved Red Dead Redemption 2 using Vulkan and custom settings, which are basically a mix of medium and high. These results are given by the inbuilt benchmark, so take them with a grain of salt. Red Dead is another GPU heavy title, so the difference is also not that big. Still, it is there, and mostly presented on the 1% lows. I used both CPUs on this game and I must say that I didn't notice a big difference, even with my RX 5700 XT. I did notice though a bit more drops here and there with the Ryzen 5 2400G, maybe due to the lower IPC and maybe due to the fact that it has way less cache. And that is why 1% lows numbers are way lower with the 2400G. Overall, pretty decent results with both CPUs. Now starting with the competitive games, and what better than CSGO and its crazy high FPS numbers? Well, for my surprise, the difference wasn't that big. We can see in the side-by-side comparison that in some parts we have a difference of 60 FPS, and since the smokes in this map push the FPS to a lower number, the difference in the averages also gets narrowed. Still, we see a difference of around 30 average FPS in almost any resolution, which is pretty nice. Overall, in a real-world scenario, Ryzen 3 3100 will have a difference of more than 60 FPS in most cases, and that alone may be what some people need to hear in order to upgrade. Moving on. This time we have Ghost Recon Breakpoint using medium settings and also Vulkan API. In the side-by-side comparison we can see a difference of 10 to 15 FPS in that part. In the full benchmark we get a bit narrowed difference, but still noticeable. At 1080p we have a difference of around 6 average FPS, while the most important difference is once again in the 1% lows with 8 FPS. In the end, both CPUs will play this game pretty well, as both can handle over 100 FPS with 1% lows over 60, which is pretty great for low tier CPUs if you ask me. Now with the Division 2 and the X12, we finally have more interesting results. Like I always say in my benchmark videos, you shouldn't look that much for the settings or the GPU that is being used, and instead focus on the FPS numbers. So, in this case we can see that if you have a GPU that can push over 150 FPS, or you reduce the settings in order to play at over 150 FPS, you want the Ryzen 3 3100, since the Ryzen 5 2400G can't really push much over 140 FPS while also having lower 1% lows. But if you want to play at around, let's say, 100 or 120 FPS, you can look into the 1440p results. In that case, both CPUs are way closer, with Ryzen 5 2400G falling behind by around 10 FPS, both on averages and 1% lows. Basically, both CPUs will be able to play this game at 60 or 75 FPS without a single problem, being the Ryzen 3 3100 the one to pick once you want to go over that.
Fresh ammo coming up.
The last game tested today is World War Z, also using Vulkan API. In this game the difference is easily perceivable, with a big win to Ryzen 3 3100. It doesn't only have way higher average FPS numbers, but also the 1% lows are way better than on the Ryzen 5 2400G. From my own experience, this game really makes use of the CPU cache, since Ryzen 5 3600 has around the same single-core performance and has way higher FPS than with Ryzen 3 3100, as can be seen in the video above. In this case, Ryzen 5 2400G seems unable to deliver more than 120 average FPS, and most importantly, more than 80 FPS in the 1% lows. On the other hand, at 1080p, Ryzen 3 3100 gives us over 150 average FPS and over 100 FPS on the 1% lows, which is a league above compared to Ryzen 5 2400G. To close the benchmarks part, we have Cinebench R15. Once again, let's take in consideration that both CPUs have 4 cores and 8 threads, being the differences the architecture and the cache, mostly. Ryzen 5 2400G uses only one CCX, which is good, but uses the first generation Zen cores and has only 4 MB of L3 cache, due to being an APU. On the other hand, Ryzen 3 3100 uses 2 CCX, which is worse for latency, but instead uses Zen 2 cores and has way more L3 cache, in this case 16 MB. All these differences together lead to the scores that we have here. The difference in terms of single-core performance is not mostly from the 200 MHz more, but instead the architectural changes in the Zen 2 arc that deliver a higher IPC and single-core performance. That same single-core performance will also be an influence in terms of multi-core performance, hence the difference of 231 points while having the same core count. Let's go to the conclusion. So, concluding guys, it is worth to get the Ryzen 5 2400G or the Ryzen 3 3100. Ryzen 3 3100 is faster, no doubts. And also of course Ryzen 5 2400G doesn't have PCI Express 4 and has only 8 PCI Express 3 lanes. So if you are using a high-end GPU like the RX 5700 XT, you may have a problem in terms of performance, you may have a little less performance due to that, but let's be real, No one is using an APU, a Ryzen 5 2400G APU on a really high-end GPU. It doesn't make sense at all. Anything besides you wanting to have an integrated GPU to later have a discrete GPU, well, the Ryzen 5 2400G or the 3400G isn't worth at all. So if you are buying a PC and if you just want a CPU to match with your discrete GPU, let's say Ryzen 3 3100 and the RX 570, as you can see, for example, on this video I made 25 games tested, then the Ryzen 3 3100 is without a doubt what you want to get. It is faster. The power consumption is also pretty damn great. It has 4 cores, 8 threads. It can be overclocked if you are lucky enough. You can overclock it to, let's say, 4.3 GHz, which will make it even faster. The stock cooler isn't that great, but you can get a pretty decent cooler for, let's say, 20 or 30 bucks. And the price is not that bad. Sadly, since they are out of stock, the price currently is around $120, $120, $130, so it's crazy. Nobody wants to buy a CPU for that price, at least a Ryzen 3 3100. But once the prices come back to normal, the CPU will cost $99. And $99 for 4 cores, 8 threads, and this kind of performance, it is a killer deal. $99 for this kind of performance, I will say it once again, it is a killer deal. So basically, if you have a Ryzen 5 2400G and have, for example, or the 3400G of course, and have, for example, let's say a GPU as fast or faster than the GTX 1660 Super or the Vega 56, you want to upgrade the CPU. In the current prices of $120, you better get a Ryzen 5 3600 because you are way better with that. But when the prices come down and, for example, you want a cheap upgrade for later upgrade to the 4000 series, let's say, Ryzen 3 3100 is indeed a pretty damn great option for 100 bucks. So yeah, Ryzen 5 2400G if you want integrated graphics, Ryzen 3 3100 for everything else, no doubts. So guys, that's all for today. Thanks a lot for watching, really. Thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe and share this video because that really helps the channel a lot. Me and the channel, because the channel is basically me. So thanks a lot and see you in the next one.